So I want to welcome everybody to our Restorative Leadership Healing Our Community training, and want to thank the County Office of Education in San Diego for allowing us to do this, especially free of charge to our colleagues. And we appreciate you all taking the time to, just to be able to reflect on what does this mean for us. And many of us here were in different positions. You don't have to be in an administrative role. You could just be in, honestly, any kind of role, but that where you see yourself either wanting to be a leader in the restorative justice practices, or maybe you're kind of already doing some of that work. All right, so our goals for today: to facilitate an experience with participants to increase understanding of restorative leadership while demonstrating how restorative practices can be used to help restore students and adults' sense of high value, belonging, and importance in connection to our school community. So that's kind of an important one. And then we've got the increased understanding of the importance of practicing restorative leadership as a strategy to help to restore and heal the harmed members of our school community. And just so you know, when we say the harmed members of our school community, it doesn't just mean when there's a situation that happens and somebody, causes some harm. It means there's a lot of people as a part of our school community who are coming harmed to our community, where they even last school year or the school year before, they may have experienced some level of harm in their previous school, previous grade, in the community, in their family. So, and we're serving as, I guess you could say, kind of facilitating some healing in their lives as restorative leaders. So one of the things we want to do is ask you this question. As a restorative leader, how can you effectively help colleagues to see the necessity and the value of daily self-care practice? So one thing I want to do is, Gabe, do you mind if I just ask you a question and just ask, what's kind of like a self-care practice you use to keep yourself, to be your best self, I guess I would say?
One thing that I do both on my way to work and then on my way home from work is prior to on the drive, I'm thinking of, I know how easy it is to get for myself to get caught up in the challenges and the negativity. So I'm thinking of some positive things from that day that, have already happened or from the previous day. And as I go home, trying to at least focus on the positive. That's something I do. It's not anything major, but it's something that I feel has helped me to at least feel like I'm not bringing home burdens from the day.
I think that's a great practice, right? To integrate this sort of mindful and a focus on positive, thinking as you're going to work and as you're coming home, so that you can release that. You're not taking home all the negativity. So thank you. Jen, can you hear me? What's something that you do for yourself?
I try to do some kind of exercise every day so that I can get all the crazies out, and I can just try to have a mindfulness for my work, separate from what's going on away from school.
Oh, that's great. I really enjoy hearing that. And then what would you say to this question of, like, how can a restorative leader, effectively help colleagues to see the necessity and the value of that kind of daily self-care practice?
Just having a connectedness with other colleagues and staff, that you can share what you're doing and share some of the things that are happening in your classes, and you have some of that collaboration where you feel like you're not the only one going through that, having opportunities for colleagues to work together and collaborate and share ideas, but also just the ability for us to have relationships outside of our jobs, and being able to say, hey, we're going to go to, whether it's a happy hour or we're going to have a staff luncheon on campus, or do things together other than just what our jobs require of us.
That is really cool, Jen. Thank you for that, for reminding us that the relationships that we have at work are real relationships. It goes beyond just, hey, we're doing this work together, but we also care about each other, right? We're friends. We have lives beyond just that place. So thank you. Jen, what do you think? What's a way that you, and I know you're a busy woman, being a mother of 3 young kids, and but how do you try to take care of yourself?
I think for me, the best medicine for that is just getting outside. I can get really in my head about all the tasks I need to do, whether that's work related or at home or even with the kids or whatnot. And so even if the kids are with me, just giving everyone that space outside is really, really healing, but also daily reminders that it's necessary. And I really have to remind myself that every single day, that it's not a selfish thing to be able to take whatever time I need. And so I kind of have to practice that every single day, because I can really get caught up in the rat race, especially if I see other people that are already caught up in that in my head starts to become the norm or the healthy way of being. And then I have to remember that person may not be taking care of themselves. And so that's not a model to look after. But also that everyone kind of has a different threshold of which they need to kind of take care of themselves and what they're capable of handling. And that's okay if I'm on a different kind of threshold than somebody else too.
Oh, that's great, Jen. Thank you for that. And I really like that you mentioned going outside. It's something, I do a lot of in-house work and, like through the computer. And that means a lot to me. I feel like me connecting by walking among the trees and just being out there, seeing the sky, seeing the clouds. It's very healing for me as well. It's something I'm very committed to. And when you said that, I said, yes, that makes a lot of sense to me. Thank you. All right. So, we want to just then think about that, about how might we communicate with our colleagues, that of the importance, like Jen was just telling us, like everybody's on different wavelengths. So somebody might say, hey, I like Gabe said, hey, when I'm driving to work, and that's great. And somebody says, hey, maybe when I'm, take my friends to happy hour, or I go walk my dog, or I like to go for a little jog, or whatever works for people. Some people tell me, oh, I do meditation, I do yoga. Great. Everything that people do to try to take care of themselves is a benefit to the community. It's just what Jen said. It's not selfish. It's self-care to be your best self so that you can be your best self in service of others. Because if I don't take care of myself, I may end up like this guy just yesterday. I live here in Escondido, and I saw him driving down Broadway, and we were parked next to each other at a stoplight, and all of a sudden I saw him put his car in reverse, and he was burning rubber, but there was a car in back of him. And I was like, oh my goodness, he was on the side of me, and I could see him starting to go back actually. And the guy in back of him started backing up, urgently. And I realized that it was almost like a case of road rage, right? How easily we can get just something, if we're not well, something somebody says or does can maybe even turn into violence. So we want to obviously keep ourselves well. So thank you, everybody. So Fortunately, we have our colleague Tracy Thompson here. He's the executive director of our juvenile court and community schools. And we invited him to come because he is, in our estimation, and I've known him for many, many years, but he is one of I think one of the most mindful restorative leaders that I've ever seen. And I've seen him be that leader with other people and also with many, many students and with many people who have been traumatized and harmed by other people. And he has consistently been that person, not only for them, but for myself as well. So Tracy, would you be willing to kind of just share a little bit about kind of what restorative leadership means for you?
For me, given that I have the opportunity to serve some of the most vulnerable children in San Diego County, via the juvenile court community schools, serving students who've been expelled or incarcerated on probation, pregnant, parenting, and foster, it's really important that we have our staff not bring their luggage to work with them. What I mean by that is our kids have so many things that they're carrying with them. We cannot be carrying our luggage to work when we are addressing our students. And for me, as you stated, Anthony, that mindfulness activity, the checking in, the circling up, and how do you, get yourself together and get ready for work. And as I heard, people are, colleagues at happy hour. There's someone on the Zoom actually that introduced us to sushi a long time ago, and now I'm hooked. And I just want to thank that person because initially it was like, oh, I don't know about this, but one of my things is going to eat some sushi and a little sake, and I'm just chilling and winding down. But for me, it's important that as restorative leaders that everyone brings value to the table. In particular, during these last year and a half, where we're dealing with some very difficult times, not just with the pandemic, but social justice matters. How do you truly be there for your children? How do you truly be there for your schools? How do you truly be there for the community? And for me, it's important that I got to check in with myself to get ready because I know guaranteed there's going to be some heavy lifting when I come to work. But also see that there's value to every single person I come in contact with. When you're going to see a kid who's locked up for murder and is 14 years of age that has very little hope, I got to bring hope to that child. I got to have my staff bring hope to that child. So with that in mind, I go about the business of modeling what I expect of my staff. 360 folks, I can't be there for every child directly, but I can certainly be there for my staff. So I got to model for them what is the expected behavior. I got to model for them how to treat people. And too often people in my position like the power trip. And Anthony would tell you, I like to keep it real. That title doesn't mean anything to a kid. They don't care if you doctor this or do you care about me? Do you have high expectations of me? And with that, you can still hold people accountable. Oftentimes people are thinking caring is about enabling. That's the last thing our children need. They need to know the truth. Life is not going to be handed to them on silver platter. So you got to have high expectations, a lot of care, and accountability. I call it putting money in the bank. Knowing you have to take some money out eventually, you got to make some deposits. And that deposit is about that high expectation, love, and care. And it goes a long way. You're dealing with students that might have issues with where they live and rival gangs, or even situations with my young ladies with pimps and things like that. How do you mitigate that? And realizing as a school, as a person that is employed by a school district, I got to recognize that I can't do it by myself. I reach out to our partners. I reach out to people with lived experiences. I reach out to anyone I can to let them know that I need your village to help our children. And with that, we have reaped a lot of great results. There's someone on the call that knows I coach. That's one of my highs, to see that a young person I've been able to touch has the opportunity to succeed in life because of what we do and what we're all about. Oftentimes I'm running from work straight to practice wearing a suit. It's a shame that some kids like, man, you coming from court? Or do you have to go to church today? So it's important to me to model that, you can still be cool and wear a suit. You can be yourself, speak the truth, and wear a suit. You can be down for your neighborhood and wear a suit. So for me, it's very important that we never forget where we came from, remember our struggles, and we use that to support our children and our families. So that's a very brief opportunity to chat with you about what it means to be a restorative leader, in my opinion. There's a lot of people that depend on us, and I'm glad that Anthony continues to have these types of opportunities for people to talk, to gather, and to serve one another. But ultimately, if I were to leave you with something, it's all about relationships. Cultivating relationships. Again, as I mentioned, our parents and the community at times, they don't give a crap about what your title is. They care about, how you helping them out. Building relationships, not shaming them or blaming them. How do we work together to achieve the common goal of being the best we can for our kids? So for me, it's a little bit about my world, and I coach track as well, so it's all year round. But when you look at it from a personal perspective, I have my own children, I want my kids to know that I am there for them as well, but I need the community to know that that's my child.
Wow.
That's my child. And so I got to make sure that I got to walk that talk, because if I'm not, my own family could be at risk. Say, your dad worked for the system, he ain't about nothing. It put my own family at risk. So again, be true to yourself. Don't forget where you came from, and walk the talk. That goes a very long way.
And Tracy, I have a question for you. I know, you've done this. You really implemented that restorative practices. You started with staff, because I've seen you do that, like circle your staff up. You've done that often, where you've had them check in with each other and get to know each other and have fun together, but really to connect on that human level. And can you just speak on that?
Yeah, everyone has challenges. And like I mentioned before, I believe it's my responsibility to find everyone's strength. So operate from a strength-based perspective. I feel it's my responsibility to build that culture, build that relationship. And I find ways to acknowledge people doing the right thing, because too often we quickly remind them they're doing the wrong thing. So for me, again, cultivating relationships, having high expectations, knowing that everyone has a gift and a strength, and allow them to bring it to the table really does change the culture. We were having some difficult times about 6 years ago in our organization. And when I was tasked by becoming the executive director, one of the first things I did was, we got to circle up. We got to have a circle and talk about, what are you here? What are you all about? What is your mission? What is your vision? So I'm gonna let you what mine is. We start talking about things like eradicating institutionalized racism. We start talking about social justice matters. Not a lot of people want to talk about that, but I think it's important that you should know where I stand, and I'm not going to waver from that. So with that, I've been able to negotiate and work and build relationships with people that oftentimes I view them as the enemy. Probation, the judges, and folks like that. Now we have the lowest incarceration rate in several years in San Diego County, because we knew that incarceration wasn't working, so why we continue to do it? So how do you get that message across without being offensive? But that message was clearly heard because I had to cultivate a relationship and use the data to show that this is not working, so let's do something different. I was able to show another example with supporting my pregnant and parenting teams. When you see a young lady 12 years old pregnant, man, that's tough, right? And that's and I've had 3 in this past year and a half. So how do you be there for that child? A child having another child, and recognizing that you can't do it alone. So we partner with organizations. I have a school called Lindsay, where there's low-income housing upstairs. There's a medical center 2 doors away. It's that community school vision, that village that's going to help raise that child. I just opened up a new school called the Soul Academy, the Catholic Boys and Girls Club on Imperial. In that building, we have a coding school. We have the Heartbeat, which is training young children to learn how to play the marching bands that the Historical Black College to provide. We have the Historical Black College tour coming through there. We have an early child education program coming through there. So it's about addressing multiple generations, but realizing that I cannot do it by myself and relying on the entire community to lift up every single child.
Wow. Well, thank you, Tracy, for, just everything you do, but also just taking the time to be with us for a few minutes to give us that perspective and to help us understand when you talk about relationships, you're not just talking about relationships with a few people, but you really truly are in relationship with many, many partners throughout the community. And you reach out to make relationships even with those who may have done you wrong and your people wrong in some ways in the past. And you truly have reached out as a restorative leader to restore and to create bridges where they've been necessary to be able to help the whole community. So thank you for your example. We just appreciate that, just hearing that, just hearing your commitment and your personal commitment as a coach and a dad and just a community member. So thank you for all you do. We really appreciate you.
Thank you all as well. One last project I failed to mention is I'm working with Pastor Miles Pearson. There's a curriculum out called the Third Option. Right, the third option talks about our blind spots. I want to mention that because we all have our own blind spots. And so I'm very fortunate to pilot it in our juvenile court community schools, but also I'm getting probation and law enforcement interest in using that curriculum as a tool as well to help build relations. Again, there's some trying times right now. We talked about, pandemic and social justice matters. We talked about the election last year. How did that impact relationships? Right. So again, there's a lot of work to be done, but I leave you with, you just got to be true to yourself. Do you, be you. I can't be you. I can't be Robert. I can't be Andy. I can be me and be the best version of that. And that works well for me.
That's excellent. Thank you, Tracy. And I know you got a lot of stuff to get done, but appreciate you taking the time again for us. We need, as restorative leaders, we need to be data-driven, right? And we need to help our schools be data-driven. And just consider what types of data you might need to access in order to measure if the school's restorative justice practices efforts are improving some of your key desired outcomes. So when I think about like what might be some of your key desired outcomes at your school, Gabe, can you hear me? I just wanted to ask you, what would be some of your key desired outcomes at your school? Like, what would you like to see kind of improve there at your schools? What are some of the key things?
I think parent engagement.
Okay.
I think that's one that just comes to mind.
And that's a good one.
Yeah.
By the way, let's just stay there for a moment, Gabe, because I think that's a key thing. And by the way, your concern on that is a concern of almost every school I've been to in this county. They pretty much all tell me the same thing. Like, man, we got to get our parents more engaged. It's like, okay, so the key is then to ask yourself, okay, well, what kinds of things could we do within the restorative justice practices realm to help them feel more engaged? And one of the things that I know I've been involved in some of these parent meetings, and I'll circle them up. And we teach them about how to do check-ins, right? How to do small group activities, and to come back into the larger group the way the kind of our flow is. And so what we found is that parents are like, "Wow, that was the best meeting I've ever been to." It's like, "Oh, that's great to hear," But the hope is that parents would begin to experience the engagement at a different level, and then they'll talk to other parents, right? And so that you'll get more parents engaged in your meetings and in your activities, and that they're talking about relevant things, right? But they're done in a way where they can grow, and you could easily measure that by just the sign-in sheets, right? Like how many people signed in the September meeting, and then what about how are we doing in December or January or February? Like, has it improved progressively? And then kind of finding ways to, again, in a relevant way, engage them even in leadership, beyond just your typical PTA type of thing. So it's kind of like, I guess, then thinking about what's that data you want to be looking at. So thank you. And Jen Hansel, might be one thing that you would want to see, like a key desired sort of outcome that you would like to see at your school?
I was just writing some notes down, and parent engagement, obviously, the big one. But the other one is creating systems that are not now in place to provide students an opportunity to succeed before they fail. I think a lot in education, kids don't succeed, and then we put a Band-Aid on it. We try to fix it after the fact. And I think if we could get something in place where kids had resources for success before they got to a point where they were frustrated or felt like they couldn't dig themselves out, or those types of things, providing systems for student success that are embedded in their school day, so that they don't feel like they have to try to do it on their own time after school when they might be taking care of little brothers and sisters, or have jobs or things like that. Provide those things. Yeah, the systems for success in the school day.
I love that, Jen. And by the way, I don't know if you noticed, but your comment does connect a bit with Lisa's earlier comment, where she says there's kids that are kind of flowing under the radar, and maybe they're not acting out just yet or anything like that. But you're talking about reaching them before as a prevention. And one of the things that we say in the restorative justice practices world is, if we could get into a habit of circling up the kids who are tending to sit in the back and just kind of be under that radar, they're going to be seen a lot more, and they're going to be asked to speak with us, right? They're going to be asked to have a voice, and then we have an opportunity to tell them how much we value them. And so that in itself becomes a preventative type of thing, where it's engaging them at a time where there's no problem at all, right? They're just coming together to do simple check-ins or discuss content within their classes, or just it could be different kinds of even fun activities that begins to engage them. So sometimes what people then will look at is, they'll say, hey, I want to look at then, if I'm trying to do prevention, am I reducing the office referrals for negative behavior over time? So they kind of keep track of that. They look monthly. What's that? Is there a certain class or a certain couple of classes where the teacher tends to send kids out more than others? And then it's about, how do we support that teacher so that they can learn ways to connect with their kids at a deeper level, maybe again in circle. Maybe they don't feel comfortable running the circle by facilitating the circle, but maybe you do. And you're that person that goes in to model for them. And pretty soon they catch on, and they're engaging with the kids like they've never done in their entire educational career. And then they find, I'm sending less kids out. You know why? Because you're connected to them in relationship, how Tracy was telling us. You're more understanding, you're more empathetic because you've listened to them. You're more trauma informed because you've actually heard their story. So those are kind of some of the important things. Thank you for bringing that up, Jen. What we want to do is just kind of just look at this for a moment, this kind of a high priority of a restorative leader. Jen Vermillion, could I ask you to read this for us, please? Thank you.
So, high priority of restorative leaders. We must work intentionally, strategically, and consistently to restore/heal the oppression/harm that has caused students and staff to lose trust and hope in our school community. Some of this oppression and harm caused trauma that is generational, yet we are challenged as leaders to find ways to restore people's sense of dignity, belonging, and safety in school.
Thank you, Jen. So I know that's kind of a heavy statement that you read, but it's important because we know this exists in every school that I've been to, at least. But what does it mean to you?
Well, I think for me a couple things that kind of stand out to me. And one is also recognizing the students, but also the staff that have lost trust and hope in our school community.
Wow.
And recognizing that as leaders, we are leaders to both our students and the adults that we serve. But also helping them to recognize that even some of that generational harm has been experienced by our students, but have also been experienced by our staff. And so I guess the silver lining there being that if we can help one another to see that in some ways there are some shared experiences there, then maybe we can help each other to heal.
Wow, that's powerful. Love everything that you said. Thank you. And Erica, what about yourself? What does this mean to you?
I think just doing the modeling, and I was kind of thinking about that earlier too, with how do we share that self-care? How do we share that importance? And I think that at least I learn experientially. And so I just try to include the self-care in any interaction or professional development that I do, and anything, so that then they feel it, they experience it and feel it and be like, oh yeah, it really is as easy as taking a few deep breaths.
Wow, that's powerful, Erica. Thank you for all of that. And because it reminds me, some people, believe it or not, they have experienced trauma in math. They have felt dumb. They felt demeaned and devalued when, parents talk to them. It's like, why aren't you doing that? Or, it's not that hard, or, people have demeaned their feelings. And so there's trauma connected to math, literally, so, and especially, if you're dealing with a student who has some kind of learning difference, and it's like reading is difficult, writing is difficult, a lot of things in school can be kind of traumatic for them because it makes them feel dumb. And so it's important then that we help the teachers understand, hey, their social emotional wellness, as Erica was saying, is so important. It's the foundation of all of our learning. So thank you for that. Lon, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Would you be willing, Lon, to read this for us?
Sure, no problem. Defining restorative leadership. Restorative leaders emphasize the importance of positive relationships as central to building community. They promote values and principles that use inclusive, collaborative approaches. They build systems that promote restorative support that is intentionally, strategically, and consistently implemented as a way to promote and strengthen positive, transformational school and organizational culture. Restorative leaders model through every interaction a way of communicating that empowers and helps restore trust within all members of our school and organizational community. Restorative leaders help all school and organization members to participate in the restoration of others.
So I know that was a lot, Lon, so thank you for reading it, first of all. But then if you would just kind of look it over, and was there a phrase that you read that kind of resonates more deeply with you, or is there anything that you would be able to say about any of this?
Too many things. The thing that I kind of focus in on is this idea of positive transformational school and organizational culture. Mm-hmm. And I think of that as such a tall order, right? Because there's kind of earlier, that first question you asked about self-care and like, how can we get others to see the importance of it? I think is the fact that it's generally not seen as important or is seen as something that can be pushed to the side, something that's not weaved into like how we do business in schools, is the result of culture. And so I think about how, for example, like we can't deny the culture of an organization or our communities, our families, whatever, and that impact that the well-being of that community has on us as individuals. So if we exist in school cultures that don't see the importance of self-care, even if I tell myself every single day, right? Like, this is important, this is important, this is important. It's hard to always fight back against the culture of the school that you're in. And so when I think about restorative leadership, it's about modeling. A lot of people has said like walk the talk.
Mhm.
And it's also about like, it's about really about modeling it, doing it, and prioritizing it, and really matching what you're saying is important to you as a person, right? So if I'm saying, I believe these restorative principles, which oftentimes as leaders like require humility as well, like, am I modeling that? And so how does my kind of values match what I'm saying I'm about, and how's that matching with my action? And then so that's kind of what I'm thinking about, is like, there's all these other elements of, culture that really impact us. And I think it's important for leaders to know what are those cultural algorithms that exist in our schools, or in our organizations. Like, what are they? Like, could you describe them? Like, because, when you walk into a school or an organization or a workplace, you can feel the vibe. And can you articulate what it is that you're feeling? And I think when we do that, that's the first step to being like, okay, so if it's that right now, what are we trying to move
That's
forward?
powerful to not, it's funny, in some ways to hear you talk about, hey, yeah, you can feel the vibe, but you're saying, but how do we strategically change that vibe in some ways to move to where we want to move this, right? And it's very powerful hearing you talk about the culture, and also that people have to model by living what they say they're going to do. And now, just on this paradigm shift, just want to see if I could ask one of you to kind of read through this. And Gabe, would you be willing to kind of read, like, you see where it says oppressive leadership and then restorative leadership? Would you be willing to just kind of read the difference between oppressive leadership and then restorative, just go back and forth on that?
So oppressive leadership is all staff and students accountable to the leader, or the restorative leadership is all staff and students accountable to each other. Oppressive leadership is the leader tells staff students their tasks and responsibilities. Restorative is all staff and students help to develop their tasks and responsibilities. On the oppressive side, leaders' voice and ideas are most important. Restorative is staff and student voice and ideas are encouraged and honored. All voices are essential. Oppressive leadership, staff are anxious about being evaluated. Students are anxious about being graded. On the restorative end, leader develops supportive and collaborative evaluation and grading. Oppressive leadership, the leader is the disciplinarian feared by students and staff. Restorative leader, the leader empowers others and develops collaborative accountability. Oppressive leadership, the leader discourages complaints and challenges to their authority. Restorative leadership, the leader welcomes challenging feedback and facilitates dialogue for community solutions.
That's really helpful, Gabe. Now, I know you read a lot there, but was there one of these that kind of popped out at you a little bit more than another, or anything like that? Was you kind of read through those?
I think the last one for me, it's sometimes it can be challenging it's hard not to take things personally as a leader, right? And so especially if you've put a lot of time and energy into something, and sometimes you realize it's not working, but it's just hard sometimes to get that kind of feedback. But so having a forum where and an environment where people feel like it's not just simply going through the motions for asking their opinion, but really you value that and it means something to you, and you have to be willing to not take that personally.
Wow, that's powerful that you are growing in that way of being able to accept that, because that takes humility, right? On a leader's, like yourself, takes humility, and I know that oftentimes leaders are kind of lightning rods of all the staff. You're the one that's blamed for a lot of stuff that may not even be your fault, and it can feel harmful in some ways, because we're human beings, right? And you mentioned to not take it personally. How do you try to do that?
with some experience, you kind of, initially, you do tend to respond out of emotion, or sometimes, everyone's frustrated. And so, you kind of let that get the best of you. So for me, I try to be as transparent with folks as possible when it comes to making decisions, and including them in the hope that, at least we can have like the full picture of what's gone into a decision. But yeah, I would say it's easier said than done. But I think I've found just even systems at our school that we've developed over time, like PLCs and things like that, where they've just allowed for folks to have a voice. And I found them to be very valuable as we make decisions. We're not making them in isolation, but hopefully making an informed decision. So I don't know if I really answered the question, but I think systems is a big part of it, and just making sure that, you're helping to establish that environment, and trying to just not react out of emotion, really, if as much as possible.
Well, that I really appreciate that, Gabe, because it sounds to me like you do the prevention. They always say prevention is way better than having to intervene later, right?
Yeah.
And so it sounds like you really do what you can, whether it's in PLCs or collaborative kinds of decision making, and informing people, being transparent is what I heard you say. That then people feel like they had a voice, right? It's not just kind of coming down from King Gabe, boom, and with your scepter and everything. So that. But what that does is it prevents a lot of that sort of, I guess, negative engagement with them, because you're like, hey, I tried my best to engage you, and I gave you a chance to have a voice, and I was hoping you would express your concerns if you had them or whatever. But we try to come up with a collaborative decision here, and then so in some ways you kind of prevent that. But then at different times you said you have to dig deep to not take things personally, because sometimes honestly, even colleagues can be mean, right? And you can feel attacked sometimes, right? You're a human being. Jen Vermilion, would you be willing to read this restorative servant leadership slide?
Sure. So restorative servant leadership puts others ahead of his or her agenda, is intentional about others' needs, is available to them, and able to accept their ideas and desires as important, possesses the confidence to serve. How we treat others is a reflection of how we think about ourselves, initiate service to others. Great leaders see the need, seize the opportunity, and serve without expecting anything in return.
Thank you, Jen. And then, Jen, is there anything in here that kind of resonates with you at all?
It all resonates. I think one thing that was kind of interesting to think about was how we treat others as a reflection of how we think about ourselves. I hadn't really thought of that, but that's just kind of interesting to think about. Yeah, and
I think, Jen, one thought behind that is that, if somebody's treating you in a way that is kind of, again, demeaning and devaluing, or treating you as like less than they are, it really is a lot of times because they have some kind of inferiority complex, which they try to think of themselves as better than, where, and so it reflects on themselves, right?
Right.
So, that's kind of that whole thing of, that's, one of the reasons why we really need to accept and embrace ourselves, so that we can then be that way with other people as well. So thank you for checking that out for us. And then Lisa, would you be willing to read this next one for us, please?
Yes. Restorative servant leadership continued is not position or titles conscious. Servant leaders do not focus on rank or position. They are one person trying to help another, Being the leader means having a sense that it is a privilege to serve. Serves out of love. Servanthood is fueled by love. The extent of your influence depends on the depth of your concern and love for others.
Thank you, Lisa. Now, is there any phrase or part of this that resonates with you?
All of it. But what really stood out was the does not focus on rank or position.
And what does that mean to you, that, you know, does not focus on rank or position?
I mean, those are fleeting anyway, but just really like that's not our identity, is not in our rank or position. It's in our character. It's in the love that we demonstrate. It's in our being. And so, you know, positions come and go, titles change, but who you are at the core is your character, and that dictates how you treat others. I think when a person is focused on their rank or position, it's you know, that's rooted in something that is not, you know, real. It's not solid. It doesn't define us.
I know that, you know, many of us, you know, we've already seen this social discipline window, and just want as a reminder that restorative leader is in the with, is holding a high standard, but they're providing the support so they can reach the high standard. And one of the things that we like to say is that restorative leader accepts people where they are, and then encourages them and moves, you know, tries to move them to higher levels, but always is there to say, here's the support that you need to get to that high level. And it is, and the opposite would be in the two would be that thing of, okay, here in our school, these are our standards. And unless, you know, if you don't make those standards, here's your punishment that's awaiting you. And it's like, well, where's the support? What if this child doesn't have the wherewithal to be able to achieve that? Or what about your staff? What if your staff doesn't have the wherewithal to achieve that? Are you willing to step in and say, we are going to support you so you can be successful? And that really is that leader that has this growth mindset, right? Accepting people where they are today, providing them the supports they need to improve, and celebrating their improvements as they grow, supporting people through trauma and into resilience. So my hope is that, you know, everything I've heard from you all, I think you all have this, right? That growth mindset. And then this kind of that, it's like the social discipline window but it's really focused on the relationship, right? So that in the with, right, we're talking about people as human beings to be honored. And that's the way I felt when Gabe was talking, right? This young person, new child comes into the school, and I'm going to do everything I can to make them know at this school, you're honored. And there's unconditional acceptance here. And so the power is with that child. But it's, again, that old place was the power over the child. That two is people as objects to be managed. And there's a real conditional acceptance. And by the way, when it says unconditional acceptance, it still means that there's, you know, there still are boundaries, there's still consequences, but the human being knows that I'm accepted, I'm cared for here, and that my principal, you know, reaches out to me. Hopefully that was helpful to you. And if you're going to be able to make it tomorrow, we'll be talking about that sort of implementation at a site and the site sustainability, and that will be it. So I hope, yeah, and thank you, Robert, for sharing that, and also sharing we have our monthly collaborative meetings and other things there that he shared. So please go ahead and do that feedback, and then have a great rest of your afternoon and evening.